I really welcome you here, ladies and gentlemen, in this beautiful building. My name is Monika Högen, and I'm happy to guide you through this interesting event. First, we want to have a look at the overall picture, and who could better do that than Dr. Martin Frick? You have been the director of the World Food Program. Oh, you are the director of the World Food Program, I'm sorry, since 2021. Here at the Office for Germany, Austria, and Liechtenstein. Before, you have been the special envoy of the UN Secretary General Food Systems Summit in 2021. As well as the executive director of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. Sometimes one C is always a bit forgotten, in Bonn. I know that one of your favorite words is the word system. And why is that, and how this is related to our topic today? I think you will tell us in your keynote, and the floor is yours. Please, Mr. Frick.
Very much, coming from an unexpected corner.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. And indeed, this is a topic that is super close to my heart. If you look at my Twitter account, you will find a pinned tweet saying, if we understand smallholder farmers not only as producers of food, but actually as the mechanics who keep our life support system working, we would treat them in a completely different way. And let me explain. I mean, I'm working for the World Food Program. The World Food Program, as the name says, is the biggest humanitarian organization on this planet who comes in when people don't have enough to eat. As simple as that. Now, if you look at the numbers from before COVID to today, we had basically around Christmas 2019, 135 million hungry people in the world, acutely hungry. That means so hungry that they need assistance in order to survive. Today it's 340 million. We have never seen such an explosion in hunger in such a short time. And before 2019, our catchline was always, hunger is the most solvable global crisis there is. Because from 1945 to basically 2015, these numbers consistently went down because we made incredible progress in food production, in distribution, in processing of food. And so while the world population was rapidly going up, hungry people in absolute terms, not in percentage, in absolute terms were going down. And since 2016, everything is going belly up. We give three reasons. One, sadly, is conflicts, and we have we have more live conflicts that we had ever since the Second World War. There was never a moment when there was so much live fighting, and that is still the biggest driver of hunger. But the others, and that brings me then to the smallholders, is climate change and the ever-increasing impacts of climate change and the costs. Now, if I'm not zooming in climate change, I can do that later, but in the costs, what we have seen in the last 5 years is massive disruption of a global supply chain by COVID-19, by the war against Ukraine, but also massive reduction of income, because the African continent in particular is very much dependent from remittances, which is more than 90 billion a year. And at the time in COVID, when basically everything stopped down, also the remittances stopped. My point here is vulnerability. And part of the vulnerability is that about 60% of the world's calories are being produced by only 4 plants. And that's the result of a commodization and mechanization of large-scale agriculture. Because people didn't reduce their diet to wheat, maize, rice, and soy because they believe it's particularly delicious, but it's tradable. It's tradable in big quantities, and these are crops that can be produced in large monocropping, which makes it very little labor intensive, very easy to process, and very easy to trade globally. What's not to like? Well, we understand more and more the downside of monocropping is actually a loss in nature capital, a loss of soils, problems with water, and ever more vulnerability of these crops to pests, which in return demand for large use of herbicides. That's obviously also not so good a solution. So I want to have that point very clear. We have this focus on very few varieties because it makes economic sense. And it has formed our paradigm about good agriculture with a silent assumption, and silent assumptions are always the ones who are most difficult to tackle. And the silent assumption is little labor-intensive agriculture is good agriculture. Now, if we come, and if I take Olaf's role here, and I come from from the natural system and say, what do we need? Well, obviously, we are on a living planet. We need to keep this system working. We need to close the cycles. And only now we even start to understand the incredible complexities of something like, for example, the interconnection between soil health and soils being the biggest hotspot of biodiversity on this planet, and something like human health, gut health, and medical situations that occur when people don't get the nutritious food they want to have. So what we need is actually very labor-intensive systems, because an agroforestry system where we know that it does work and where we know that it can produce higher yields than if you go for one variety on a piece of land have only one downside, and that is that they are labor-intensive. But if you now look at smallholder farmers, despite everything, despite large-scale production, despite countries like Ukraine, at least until recently, having been able to produce at unbeatable prices, it is still that 80% of the food that is being consumed in Africa by Africans is produced by smallholder farmers. And that's important to understand, because very often if we say, oh, we have a food crisis, we need to solve that, let's bring more fertilizer, for example, to the African continent. What we actually mean is, let's produce cheap commodities for export, which are benefiting rich countries. It's not helping smallholder farmers, or at least often it does not. So for a smallholder farmer, if it wouldn't be for the competition by the global market, working in a way that augments natural capital is a no-brainer. Why would I buy expensive inputs when I can solve the problems with what I have? I can improve my soil by composting, by applying all sorts of techniques. I can address a problem with pests by specific crop circulation, by mixing in biodiversity, by getting in predators that eat exactly the insects that are bothering me. But again, all of that is labor intensive. And now the additional costs that are occurred, because it is more labor intensive, have to be borne by someone. And here we have in biodiversity the same problem that we have in climate, that we go around basically blaming each other. We say, the consumers, they have to pay more for the goods. Well, the consumers are ordinary people. They are not particularly susceptible to paying more for their basic needs. Well, then it needs to be the big trading companies. Well, the big trading companies will tell you, we are competitive. And if we are not competitive anymore, we are out of business, and you don't want us to go out of business. So then you are basically going to the political decision makers. And this is where the tragedy begins. Because a minister here would tell you, I'm totally sold, I'm on your side, but we need an EU regulation. Then things get a little bit more complicated. Then within the EU framework, even if you find a bunch of ministers who are helping you on this agenda, they would say, well, yes, but then we have a European regulation, and that makes our European continent less competitive. So finally, we go to this mystical international Olympus, which is the United Nations. And I happened to work there for the last 10 years, and it looks inside a little bit different than from the outside. Let's put it here. But the problem, of course, is that the UN is nothing else than a club. The UN is presenting the tables and the chairs and make sure there's coffee and there's light and there's microphones. But in the end, it's the member states. And if you do have member states with vested interests, you will never, ever be able to agree on anything. Now we have a problem. We stand there, shrug our shoulders, somebody, for God's sakes, got to do something. Then we come back and point to the smallholders and say, you have to fix it, which is utterly unfair because, you know, these are particularly the most vulnerable people. But I believe that, you know, like in every living system, and I think you said that's my pet word, you have entities of different sizes that need to come together in order to be a living system. If you have a tree, the branches and the leaves wouldn't hold without a big solid foundation. But the foundation wouldn't be able to live if it wouldn't be for the leaves. So starting with the smallholder farmers, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where actually the environmental practices need to be brought together. But then you need a medium level, that's the organization of the smallholders, a mutual learning. And from my little experience, farmers are everywhere in the world the same. You can tell a lot, but nothing convinces more than the example of a fellow farmer who is actually successful with what she is doing. So you need these associations to build that momentum. And then, and this is where, you know, a city like Hamburg comes in as a trading hub, you need the offtake. You need the companies who are actually ready to put your products into their assortment. As it seems, it's still a niche market. It is still something where you need to demand boutique prices for products with a specific CSR story, addressing well-off customers who are prepared for that. But then it can ultimately become more. And I see Johannes Merck here, you know, Otto played a big role in pushing for legislation. And sometimes, and I'm afraid to say as a representative of a UN organization, that leadership really needs to build in an organic way to make it into an organization. And it's not the other way around, because the UN is always very good in setting, you know, bright stars on the night sky, 1.5 degrees, zero biodiversity loss, but a little bit less good when it comes in implementing, quite simply because you can only go so far as the political will of all of your members are carrying you. So I leave you with more questions than answers, but I hope that in the panel we have a chance to discuss, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And yes, of course, we will try to find more answers to all these questions during the discussion. But before we do that, we want to go from the local, from the global perspective, as you said, from the stars and the skies, maybe have a closer look to the ground, to the realities, the local realities in the coffee countries. And our journey first takes us to Tanzania. And for this, I want to welcome Mkonyi here in Hamburg. He is the co-country manager of the Hans Neumann Stiftung in Tanzania. And you have more than 12 years of experience in the coffee sector. So it means that you know very well what is at the farmer's mind. And yeah, we are really happy to hear from you what's going on in Tanzania.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to share our experiences in Tanzania on how we integrate biodiversity practices in coffee production systems. Yeah, so I would like to start by just giving a brief overview of how the coffee production systems look like in Tanzania. So looking at the lowland areas, coffee is usually produced as pure stand. So it means that coffee is not integrated with other crops. It is not integrated with shade trees. So it is like fully exposed to the sun. And in these areas, in lowland areas, they usually experience high temperatures. It can go up to 31 degrees. And they usually experience prolonged droughts. And the soils in these areas, usually they have like low organic matter content, which also affects the water holding capacity of the soils. So a combination of no shade, higher temperatures, prolonged droughts, and low water holding capacity, it really puts coffee production at risk in these areas. But also looking at and this is why integration of biodiversity practices is quite very important. Looking at the highland areas, in these areas, the climate situation is a bit better compared to the lowland areas. And in these areas, they do integrate coffee with shade trees, with other crops, like fruits, bananas, avocados. But the thing is, the systems are not really sustainable because, for example, the trees that they integrate in coffee production, these are the trees which are suitable for timber production. So they plant the trees, but in 10, 15 years, they cut down the trees to produce timber, so it's not really sustainable. And this is why we need to, actually we are promoting the sustainable and well-structured biodiversity models. So how do we promote integration of biodiversity practices in coffee production? So first we promote and we train farmers on agroforestry practices. And actually jointly together with the farmers and with the local research institutions, we have been able to develop suitable agroforestry design and models for the smallholder coffee farmers. So basically in this agroforestry design, we train farmers on how to integrate shade trees with coffee, but also fruit trees like bananas and avocados, but also we facilitate access to the planted materials, all the shade tree seedlings and the fruit tree seedlings. Yeah, also we promote soil and water conservation through training farmers on different practices. One of the practices is we train farmers on production and application of biofertilizers. And actually these were tested and validated in the Initiative for Coffee and Climate project. So the outcomes showed like the biofertilizers were actually very useful in terms of moisture retention in the soil, but also they increased the organic matter content in the soil. But also we are training the farmers on mulching, so both dry and live mulching. And for the case of live mulching, we promote the Carnavalia plant, as you can see, this one. So this is a leguminous plant, and it was also tested and validated by the local research institutions, and it showed that it contributes into moisture retention, but it does nitrogen fixation. So during the rainy season, it will grow like this. It has broader leaves, it produces a lot of leaves, but during the dry season, all the leaves, it will shed all the leaves, and they will apply like a dry mulching in the soil. Of course, after some time, it will actually decompose and fertilize the soil. But also, we are training the farmers on production of compost and application of manures. And this here is how they produce the biofertilizers, and they're actually using the locally available materials. So it is less costly and easy to produce the biofertilizers. Yeah, also we train farmers on integrated pest management, IPM. So here we train them on the catch-all methods to control pests. But also as the last option, we train them on the application of chemicals. And on the application of chemicals, basically we in Tanzania, you can access the highly hazardous pesticides in the market. And most of the farmers, they do not have the knowledge to identify the highly hazardous pesticides. So we train them on how to identify the highly hazardous pesticides so that they should not use those ones. They should buy the ones which are not highly hazardous, but how to apply them safely with the correct application, but how to store them safely. But that is the last option. So on the cultural methods, we usually train the farmers on application on the use of insect traps, as you can see on the first picture there. And we also train them on production and application of biopesticides. So from the biopesticides also they use the locally available materials like the neem tree, the tephrosia, ginger, and then they can use these materials to produce the biopesticides. And this was also tested and validated by the local research institutions. And it showed that in the fields, for example, which were applied by biopesticides, the population of the pesticides really decreased compared to the other fields. So it also works. Yeah. Yeah, we also promote pollinator conservation. So we basically train the farmers and we do promote beekeeping in coffee fields. This actually, apart from enhancing pollination in coffee, it also play a part of supporting the farmers to diversify their income sources. Yeah, so we also support the communities to enhance sustainable landscape management. And here we work together with the community members. So together with the community members, we discuss the climate change challenges in their areas, and jointly we develop mitigation measures, and then we support the communities to implement the mitigation measures. And this usually could be like developing bylaws that aim at protecting, for example, water sources or forests in the communities, establishing or implementing the tree planting campaigns in schools, but also identifying degraded lands and planting trees in degraded lands, but also planting of trees in water source areas. Yeah, so the impact. Together in a partnership with Landler, through the AI-based monitoring system, we were able to measure the environmental impact of one of our projects in southern Tanzania, where we are implementing all these activities which have just, the practices that I've just presented. And the outcome showed that these practices contribute to carbon storage. So it was up to 16,892 tons of carbon were stored. But also the water holding capacity was around more than 286,000 cubic meters. And also they are still collecting the data on biodiversity. So in the next reports, we should be able to see the outcome of biodiversity protection based on the practices that we are promoting. And actually this was measured from an area of around 287 hectares. So the lessons that we have learned so far, apart from the other benefits of biodiversity practices, we have learned that these practices also help to diversify incomes. For example, in the agroforestry practices that we are promoting, farmers are planting bananas so they can sell the bananas. Also, they are planting avocado trees. They can also sell the avocado trees, but also it helps to improve food security because some of these fruits they can eat together with the families and improve the food security. But also talking about promoting beekeeping, for example, it also helps to diversify the household incomes. But access to finance is very crucial in establishing these diversified production systems. because to transform the traditional production systems, there is a cost implication because they have to buy the shade tree seedlings, they have to buy the fruit tree seedlings, they have to buy like the beehives, etc. But also it is very important and it enhances sustainability if you engage all the relevant stakeholders in the community when developing the biodiversity models. We learned a lesson in some previous projects where we only sat with the local research institutions and designed some sort of an agroforestry model, which when we went to implement, some of the farmers said, we don't like these kind of trees, the tree seedlings, so we are not going to plant them. So usually it makes sense if you sit together jointly with the farmers, the government officials, the local research institutions, and you come up with a joint model or design. Also, the stronger farm organizations are critical to successfully transforming production systems because establishing these diversified production systems is one thing, but they have to be maintained. And to be able to maintain these systems, you need to have people who can make follow-ups. So with stronger farm organizations which have like extension systems, they can do help to support the farmers maintaining these systems, but also to access the inputs which are needed, like the seedlings and other inputs. Yeah, but also you can get better results if you combine different biodiversity practices. If you say you only promote agroforestry and you leave other practices like which enhance soil and water conservation, if you leave out like the pollinator conservation and other practices, you will not get like better results. And this is due to the current climatic situations in these areas. So a combination of different practices, it leads to better outcomes. Yeah, thank you for listening, and that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Morgan. We heard a lot already, and our challenge now is to bring it all together. And maybe I would like to start with you, Pablo von Waldenfels. You're the head of the Sustainable Coffee at Tchibo. Everybody, I think, knows Tchibo. I think we all came in contact from our childhood onwards with Tchibo when we came first in touch with coffee. You developed also a farmer support program for 6 countries, if I'm not mistaken. So it means that you're also very close to farmer situation as well. What we heard already is that the issue of biodiversity is much more complex than we might think. It is at first glance that we need a mix of practices and that we also have to take several crops into consideration, the difficult financial situation of farmers. What do you think? Would you agree with many things that were said before, or is your experience somewhat different in different countries?
No, I would definitely confirm that many of the things I heard speak to me a lot. As Tchibo, we are also engaged in some of the projects that were presented. And if you look at our program, Sustainable Coffee program that is now running in 6 countries, will be extended to 10 or 11 over time. So we are planning to implement this type of farmer support programs in all our supply regions where we source coffee regularly and in accordance with our coffee footprint, let's say, in each region. We would take a very similar approach. So it's testing practices on the ground. I think it was mentioned before. In theory, it is clear what needs to be done. So introducing cover crops, trees, diversifying farms. In practice, in each locality, in each country, the situation is a little different. So you need to adapt the system to each region. It needs to be tested. It needs to be validated. You need the demo farms, demo plots, pilot plots, however you want to call them, where neighbors can see if it works and take their neighbors. I'm the white monkey from Germany, and I can go to Vietnam and tell a farmer what to do, and he will tell, well, but you are not the coffee grower, I am. So they need to see. So there's a lot that speaks to me, and the challenges still persist. Labor shortage, impacts on productivity. The farmers are still, especially in coffee, competing in international markets. They are competing against Brazil, Vietnam, who are the benchmark. So it is an international market. We as a company cannot escape also from the competition. So there's only so much we can contribute to the development of the system. So there are still quite a few challenges also in implementing this. So we need to contribute as big market players together with the exporters, but it's also there are challenges to it that we also need to consider. It's a balancing act. So investing in this is a story of trade-offs that you have to do as a farmer, but also as a big company.
Okay, thank you. Olaf Tschimpke, I'm looking at you. You are the member of the Board of Trustees here at the Hans Neumann Stiftung, and you also former president of the NABU, the German Naturbund. And so you're very close to sustainability, environmental issues. You also went on a recent trip to Uganda and also had a closer look at the situation for coffee farmers there. What is your impression? Would you also align with what was said? Did you also get this idea that the issue is very complex and they're dealing with many challenges over there?
Biodiversity is complex. Therefore, it's wonderful for us because we are living out of it. Nobody can live without biodiversity and without soil and water. And I will be the elephant in the room. The view of an elephant on smallholder farmers, the view of the bees on a smallholder farmer, the view on us. So my role will be to show how it can work. It can work, but we have a look first on what is biodiversity, what kind of biodiversity we want. That's one point necessary. Second is what you can do on the farm. You told this, and I'm completely convinced with that. I'm completely convinced with that. But you need a structure around. You need a water supply system. And you can't do it on the farm. You need a water supply system around. Therefore, it's necessary to have cooperatives. It's necessary to have the support of governmental institutions on the local level. That's necessary. Otherwise, it's not possible to solve the biodiversity problems, the soil problems, the water problems, and the climate change problems. So structural transformation is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're making our topic even more complex.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Making it even more difficult to find answers. But you're right, we have to have a more systemic, a more structural approach to the whole topic. And I think, Martin, you would like to hear that because, again, as I said before, and you also mentioned it, it's the systems that fail very often. But the problem is also how can we do that? Because in many of those things that you mentioned, the projects are limited, so and they create little islands where things might work well. But how can we get to the broader picture, and how can we use also, how can those stakeholders sitting here use their influence in order to change systems which are very often created by other actors? And
yeah. I mean, the first observation is the system that we have created over the last decades has worked and has served us well for a long time. I mean, the astonishing success in reducing hunger was the Green Revolution. So, you know, we need to acknowledge that, but now we need to understand more and move forward. And I was very interested in the presentation you just gave, because the system which you have presented is monocropping in the beginning, and then let's make it a little bit more diverse. But the best form of it was actually the one, interesting enough, which is closest to what you would find in nature anyway. So Olaf has said biodiversity systems are incredibly complex, but mimicking nature is actually a very good starting point, and to see the diversity, and the magic is to combine these two blueprints. So that diversity that obviously in nature works, but also the necessity so that people can live with that. So if you have legitimate, I always struggle with this word, leguminous. Leguminous. Nitrogen-fixing plants, that's good for the soil. But of course, you can use beans and you can eat the beans. So you have also a benefit for people. So looking at nature, copying what nature does, but doing it with species that are actually helpful for people. And I just wanted to emphasize your point on plant breeding, which is such an important one. Because that narrow focus that I mentioned in my little introduction on species, on 4 species and 60% of the calories, these are also the most elaborated species. If you are a corn producer, every 2 years there's a new variety that is yielding more results. But if you're a smallholder farmer and you're farming with millet and sorghum and chickpeas and that sort of indigenous crops, you're dealing with the same variety since 50 years, and that's a massive point of improvement. Mm-hmm.
So now, Morgan, I'm looking at you. What do you think if the farmers you're dealing with were sitting here and listening to that debate? I think they would say, okay, that's fine, but now how can we build a bridge again between the global perspective and the broader perspective back to the farmers? And how do also national governments and local authorities come into place? How can we influence them to support us more? Could you maybe... make some remarks on that.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a matter of creating awareness. If you look at the situation, for example, in Tanzania, very little is being done by the government, let's say the local government, because they do have like the extension system on the ground. And there is a number of reasons. First, they do lack resources, for example, to reach out to the farmers. But they do lack knowledge, I would say, on how they can support the farmers to address some of these challenges, like coming up with agroforestry models, coming up with these tested and validated practices like the Carnavalia, etc. So I think it has to start from the top, creating the awareness, also enhancing their skills and knowledge, because they also need to understand, like, okay, what are the impact of climate change? How do they affect the farmers? And what could be the solutions? I think in that way, if we have platforms that can, raise the awareness, create this knowledge, it can also easily trickle down to the farmers. But there should be platforms. That's also one thing which is lacking. In Tanzania, if you take out the projects that we are implementing, there's no platforms where the farmers could meet and exchange experiences with, let's say, government officials. In our projects, we have the community of practice, for example, where we have different stakeholders like traders, research institutions, local government officials. They do participate, farmer representatives, and together we share knowledge. For example, we do disseminate some of the practices that we have tested and validated so that the farmers get aware of those, government officials also get aware of those. So I think what is lacking is the platform, so there should be a platform where different stakeholders meet and exchange and share experiences. Yeah.
And what you think also, the question also goes to you, Pablo, in what way do you think projects like the ones you, Morgan, and others are running in the countries as being role models can help to create such platforms, be facilitators, and also become more political in a sense that they have more impact than just on the very spot where you're working? And is this also something you can dare to do because you also don't want to get in conflict with local authorities or something like that?
Was that for me or for Pablo?
For both of you. So whoever wants to answer
Maybe
first.
Pablo is that.
Yeah, I start? Okay. So as a European company working in Central America, South America, or Africa in projects, there's a lot we can do when it comes to farming and coffee. And we are a coffee company. We know a little bit about that stuff and can support farmers. We can also use applied research, collaborate with universities to validate, publish the results, engage with the extension center networks, help promote the practices so that they become part of the standard manuals, and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot we can do, and it's not as sensitive as one might think. We are working with local cooperatives. We are working with exporting companies that have been operating in the countries for many years. So that works, and we have examples from Vietnam and other countries where this has actually worked. I think where our limitations come in is when we speak about the wildlife corridors and so on that you just mentioned, things that happen outside the farm that require legislation, management bodies, structural reforms, etc., etc. This is where it really gets tricky, both in terms of political engagement for a European company that also sells the coffee on the European market, and not where it's produced, that's I think difficult, and also when it comes to financing. If you look at how nature conservation is financed in Europe and other more advanced economies, it's heavily subsidized by taxpayers' money. This is where the money comes from to actually finance nature conservation. There's only so much we can do as a company. I already mentioned the competitive environment we are in. It's difficult for corporates, or especially individual corporates, to step in there. I think this is where I would see the limitation that we face.
Yeah, for my side, I also think the limitations are usually, for example, as projects, we can only reach out to a certain number of farmers, but there are so many farmers out there. And to enhance the sustainability of these kind of interventions, it means we cannot work on our own. We have to work with all the relevant stakeholders. The most important one is the government, because this is mostly the responsibility of the government. But I would say, for example, for the coffee sector, the government really, the reinvestment in coffee production is actually very low, but they're earning a lot from coffee. So advocacy could be one of the important intervention to undertake, to actually really lobby with the government, making them understand how important, for example, coffee sector is in Tanzania, and for them to come up with strategies that can help to support these farmers when it comes, for example, to establishing diversified production systems which are very sustainable. Because one of the challenges that the farmers are facing, actually, getting the knowledge is one thing, but establishing these production systems, it requires a lot of resources, I would say. How do they get the resources? So there, I think the government has to come in. There have been some few number of interventions, for example, which were done by the government, but they only focus on special groups, I would say. For example, youth and women. Through the local government authorities in Tanzania, youth and women can access funds, basically small loans which are 0% interest. Of course, you can make use of those funds to like finance these kind of systems, but yeah, it's limited to some special groups, and usually the funds are not enough. Yeah.
And Olaf, coming back to what you said, and now also having listened to what was said here, of course, a lot can be done on the farms, and that might also spread out to other farms, to other areas. But how can we sort of integrate it also so that it can also spread out to what you said, and then we can come to like a system where we consider all those things and the corridors and what is done at the farm, what is outside the farm. Who is supposed to do that, and how can we get there?
You can also organize biodiversity corridors on farmland. It's possible. Even to get some economical results out of it. It's possible. But you have to change your view. You have to go more organic. You have to look how intercropping is possible, how these plants integrate to each another, how to do this more in an ecological way. It's possible. But you need support from the research side. And we have a special research community looking only on these 4 grains and on coffee, but not on which plant you can also use. Which is the tree you can use. The indigenous tree. We use then, what we are doing, eucalyptus, firewood is a real problem in all the countries. They're cutting the trees because they need firewood. But there are indigenous trees you can also use. They are fast growing, also like, and you don't have to use eucalyptus and pines, like in Uganda. Everywhere you see now eucalyptus and pines. Plantations, because they get carbon credits out of it. They cutting natural forests, waiting 2 years, then they have the baseline for carbon credits, and then they plant pines, and even on plantations, even on in agroforestry systems. Mm-hmm. And there is a lack of knowledge. Yeah. And the knowledge is there. I met guys in Uganda who have the knowledge, but we have to transport it to those projects. We have to have some demonstration plots how it can work, and it will work. It will work. And there is no chance to do this. We have the climate change, we have the droughts, but we have not only droughts, we have also floods. So we have to change the water supply system in each region, in Eastern Africa and everywhere.
Now we heard a lot about what we have to do or what you have to do, but suppose we will be able to transform what is already done in some farms into a broader context. That's it. Martin, but you also said before in your speech, you said that we have a certain tendency to shift responsibility, especially when it comes to who's going to pay for all that, from one entity to the other. It should be, or who is responsible in the end? Is it the UN? Is it the local authorities? Is it the farm holders? So in the end, who is paying for all that transformation? Or who is making it possible for the farmers to do that transformation?
I mean, when we speak about transformation, we must not lose sight that we already did a massive transformation, that these countries had different systems before. I mean, hotspots where my organization is now working, Somalia, Mali, Burkina, Niger, you name it. These were countries that were always dry lands, but they were not, in agricultural terms, unproductive. Then came colonization and then the post-colonial time, and more often than not, agricultural advice that was given, and that was the flavor of the day, was large monocropping, cut down the trees, make way for the tractors. That was exactly wrong. So if we are talking about transformation, maybe it's more appropriate often to speak about restoration and go back to functioning systems. And in that, this is a collective responsibility, but was actually
but first, sorry. But still, I mean, that's good news that we already had transformation. But it's sort of, you were also a little bit evading my question, which is, I mean, whatever it is that it's left to do, whether we call it more transformation or restoration, but who is going to pay for that, and who is going to take the responsibility?
Well, again, if we don't, we all pay for it, and we are already now.
Yeah, okay, but I think there is no doubt about that. But now, where does the money come from to enable the farmers in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Honduras to do that very transformation on a very concrete level?
Well, there's beginning of income sources. Think about the carbon money that is out there. Now, Olaf mentioned examples of how not to do it,
but you can do it in a proper way also. If you want.
There are possibilities to do it properly. There are companies who are ready to take responsibility. We have it here on the panel. There is government money available. I think a big issue is when you have been propagating a certain production model for a long time, you need to tell the farmers. And I think that is what you said. And what we see worldwide, I don't know about Tanzania, is that there were government systems to teach the farmers, farmer field schools, extension services, all of that all died for lack of public funding. And in that gap, agrochemistry companies went in and advised the farmers, but in a specific direction. And I think that extension services, that spreading of knowledge, that very granular and transactional farmer-to-farmer convincing is transactional. It takes a lot of time, lots of energy, but there's just no alternative to it.
Okay, so from a financial point of view, everything is fine. It's just
it's not.
It's just that we have to tell the farmers that they should.
It's not, but there are possibilities. Biopesticides are cheaper as to buy pesticide from those big companies in the world.
But still, I would like to insist here once more, because for me it's a bit too abstract. We need to change the system and that, because my question would also go back to the two of you working directly with the farmers. Is it really the case that in the end it's not so much an economic problem, because it can be done easily? We just have to change knowledge and to spread the knowledge and spread the word, and then it's easier. So we don't need any extra resources for that. Is that what the farmers that you work with, Teresa works with, would they agree to that?
No. No, I think the economic part is very important, because this is what we have experienced in some of our projects. We actually supported the farmers in the project areas to have access to the planting materials, for example, meaning that we supported farm organizations to establish the shade trees nurseries, so that farmers can have access to those seedlings. But then later on the challenge came okay, I'm supposed to plant, let's say, 100 shade trees in my farm. I cannot afford that. So the seedlings are there, but I cannot afford to buy the seedlings. So the economic part is very important, but also I think the models. Okay, how can farmers, even though they do not have strong economic muscles, how can they still start slowly transforming into these kind of systems? So they can start step by step. If you're supposed to plant, let's say, 100 shade trees in your farm, you can start maybe with 20. So this season 20, the next season 20, but it will be a slow process, but they'll be moving on their own. Yeah.
So suppose you have the money for the 20. Okay. Pablo.
Well, it's obvious there is, for coffee alone, an investment gap of a few billion euros or dollars per year. It's difficult to really quantify it, but it's a few billion dollars that are needed. And at the same time, there is a big opportunity here in this looming crisis that we see. So the most robust climate modeling shows that most coffee regions are increasingly becoming under pressure because of the effects that changing climate has on weather patterns. And this is one of the moments where the biggest corporates and the smallholders share one interest, which is continue growing and selling coffee. Our business model is buying coffee, roasting it, and bringing it to markets. And the farmer's model is to grow the coffee and sell it to somebody to actually roast it. So, and if we want to maintain that, there is a need of investment. And well, I'm representing one company that is now gradually increasing its investment in the different areas that we just discussed, but I see others doing the same. All right, it's not enough. It's not all of them, but I see a growing number of roasting and trading companies starting really to invest in this space, and more is needed. And one additional point I think is important. Once you are able to show that the menu that you give to the farmers, like the different gradual increase of, I wouldn't say really restoring it to the old, but making the existing systems more resilient by introducing some of the old techniques. The most important thing is here, the farmer is an entrepreneur. The farmer needs to make money of what they are doing, the farming family. So, and if we are able to show that, the demand also from the farmer side will also increase. And combining these two developments, like really showing that it works, and by injecting more money can solve a lot. And this is.
You mean the demand from the consumer side increasing?
No, the demand from the farmer side for adapting the system, and the money injected into the system by other players. For now, it's not enough. It has to be more. All you want, but to give it a little bit of a positive twist, you can actually see a shift already in how companies see this, because it's an investment into the future. Let's say in our case, into the future of our business model to actually invest in this. So,
Martin, you wanted to hop on that?
It's just a small element. I think if we talk about additional costs, that doesn't mean that these costs occur forever. But we need money for the transition. If we are restoring land, farmers can produce where they couldn't produce before, but it's a leap of faith. They have to invest 5 years of work into it. Now, who is going to pay them for these 5 years? How do they sustain their families? But having said that, it's not like this is only working forever if we put forever money in it. It's this critical time of transformation where farmers need our assistance.
Would it be a solution, let's say Tchibo or Neumann Coffee, for this critical time? They said, okay, we go down with our revenues a little bit, and we don't want to make that much money, but we give more money to the farmers, and we buy them siblings to have more shade trees.
Well, in essence, it's what we do. Because not all investments that we are doing into our program is something that we can pass on one-on-one to the consumers. And as I said earlier, it's not only us doing that; it's other companies doing the same. Because, well, it's an imperative to do if you want to stay in the business for more than 10, 20, 30 years onwards.
I think an important perspective is if a smallholder farmer knows that at the end of this transformation, here is somebody who guarantees to buy my product, let's say, at a minimum price. That gives you already a big piece of planning security, which is important. And then very often, there are government subsidies, there's all the UN sector, there are the development banks. Sometimes it's a challenge to get all of these different elements together so it makes sense. But I think from the industry sector, to give farmers a perspective, there is an uptake for your product, or there is a specific uptake for your organic produced coffee, or we help you develop a product line for forestry, agroforestry, coffee. That is helpful, and that's definitely beyond the reach of a smallholder.
But the coffee farmers so far, Morgan, do they already, if they go for all those techniques and fulfill the requirements and come up with coffee that is produced more in a biodiverse environment, do they benefit from it already? Do they have a higher income, and how does that work? How do they feel it?
Yes, actually they do benefit from it. First, it supports coffee production, especially in those areas where they experience higher temperatures, droughts, etc. But also, these models, for example, the agroforest design, it also supports farmers, or it helps the farmers to increase or to diversify their income. Because if you are planting, let's say, avocados, it means, okay, you will provide shade, but also you will harvest the avocados. But also food security, you will eat the avocados. Bananas, you will eat, some of them you can sell. So it does help the farmers to increase their income. Yeah. And that is one of the motivating factors for farmers to transform from their traditional production systems to this diversified production system. And this is what we experienced in one of our projects, because we are also supporting farmers to access the avocado seedlings. So most of them, they were very much motivated even to plant the shade trees, because they knew that they will be getting the shade trees, but also the avocado seedlings. Yeah.
So biodiversity is understood as a business case. Also.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Usually what we see, and I think we spoke about this when we prepared for the meeting, when we do these farmer support programs and we come into the region for the first time, one of the things we do is we say, okay, let's take the perspective of the farmers, or if we have the possibility, even include them into the discussion and find out what's most important to them, what matters most to them. And usually in most coffee producing regions, the first thing that comes is yield and quality management. It's and this has still nothing to do with biodiversity, but it is still, in most of the times, it's the first topic we will deal with farmers. That might be a little bit counterintuitive after all the discussion we just had, but this is what the farmers are looking for. This is what impacts their income, and is usually the first thing that we will work on together. And I remember one story when I visited Honduras, of the farmer saying, well, it's very easy. As long as we don't have our basic needs fulfilled, the monkey that comes to my farm and eats the fruits from the trees is my enemy. And when the bellies of my family are full, he becomes my friend. And I enjoy the monkey eating the produce on the farm. And I think that's a nice picture of how the farmer sees biodiversity. So first, get the economics right for the farmer, build trust, put them at the center, build a system that works, test it locally, prove that it works, and then you can gradually work towards these topics.
Martin,
I think there's even a deeper problem, because we talk about biodiversity as it would be the Smarties of a cake. That's very beautiful, but you don't really need it. We need to change the entire discussion to the very fact that we exist as human beings, the very fact that this planet is a wonderful, livable planet, and not just some piece of rock like Mars, for example, where Mr. Musk can't wait to go there. The very fact of that is biodiversity. It's our life support system. And I don't want to have a philosophical debate, but it's only explainable by our own history, that until very recently, people were powerless in the face of nature. And in the last 50 years, suddenly we are the dominant power on this planet, and it changes the dynamic profoundly. Because now it's our job to make sure that this system that keeps us alive, that we are keeping that system alive. And so we need to go away in biodiversity speaking about that particularly beautiful butterfly, but to understand that it's not only beautiful. Well, I would argue that beauty is a big value in itself, but it's a part of what makes human life possible on this planet. And we must not jeopardize that. That's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Yeah, as we are approaching more or less towards the end of our debate already, I just wanted to maybe one thing that I would like to ask from you as a last remark is because I would like to hop on what you said. I liked it very much, Pablo, when you mentioned this farmer at Honduras, when he said, "Yeah, well, I can take care of the monkey, or I'm happy with the monkey being around whenever my belly is full." So I would like to, for all of you, to maybe finish one sentence that in the future the monkey and the farmer can be happy if. Olaf, what do you think?
I think the problem is biodiversity is quite different. So if you have the biodiversity on the farm, that these are insects and flower plants, then they are useful, and the fruit trees, then they are useful. If you have the discussions about the big mammals, then you have to solve it in another way. Then you need public money for that. Out of national parks. Tanzania has a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, you were just supposed to finish the sentence.
No, you can't say it in one sentence, because biodiversity is not in one. We have millions of different species, and we have to look
millions
on
of different answers.
But on farm level, you can't deal with monkeys in that way. You can also deal with.
But can farmers and monkeys be happy one day?
Yes.
Both of them.
Yes, if they have enough fruit trees for the monkeys and the farmer.
That's the sentence we were looking for, Pablo.
Yeah, if we are successful with the programs we've been discussing and the government engagement in the long time, and this movement really picks up speed, this will happen.
Morgan, how can we reconcile farmers and monkeys in Tanzania?
Only if all the relevant stakeholders have the same perspective on biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. And Martin?
Globally, we can have successful monkey business if we understand that there are no externalities on a spaceship.
Yeah, thank you. I like also this expression. So maybe basically coffee business has to become a monkey business also. So I like that. Yeah, as I said, we we are at the event, at the end of our event. I think it was a very interesting and fruitful debate, even though, of course, it's impossible to find all the answers to all the remaining questions within this 1 hour. And it's also impossible for us to find solutions, if that would be possible for us within 1 hour here from Hamburg. From this beautiful venue to solve all the problems, then I think the world would be an easier and better place. But nevertheless, I think we learned a few things, which is that, of course, biodiversity should be regarded as a business case, or has to be regarded as a business case by the farmers, but also beyond the farms, from other stakeholders, and to integrate it into bigger systems, have a systematic approach, but and taking all the stakeholders into account without shifting responsibility from one to the other, as it was also said. And what I also found very interesting, that we said that the approach is also has to be diversified. When we talking about different crops, we have different approaches when it comes to how we deal with the biodiversity, how we implement it on the ground, but that in the end it can be a fruitful endeavor, and it's the only way forward. I think we all agreed on that, or I don't think anyone wants to contradict that here. So with these words, I would like to close it and close our event, and thank you for all having been here.